In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where alien empires clash with technologies that can shatter planets, there exists a simple truth that most civilizations have forgotten: never judge a human by their appearance. The Galactic Council learned this lesson the hard way when they dismissed Earth's representative as weak, fragile, and utterly incapable of combat. What they didn't know was that the quiet, unassuming woman sitting in their council chambers had spent decades mastering every known form of warfare across 17 different star systems. While they saw frailty, she carried the accumulated knowledge of humanity's greatest military minds. While they perceived weakness, she possessed skills that could turn the tide of any battle. This is the story of how one underestimated human became the galaxy's most feared and respected warrior, proving that sometimes the most dangerous weapon is the one your enemy never sees coming. In a universe where strength is measured by size and technology, she would show them that true power comes from something far more profound: the indomitable human spirit and mind honed for war. The aliens thought they knew what humans were capable of. They were wrong. Catastrophically wrong. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched for nearly a kilometer in every direction, its crystalline walls reaching heights that disappeared into artificial clouds. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated areas, each section designed to accommodate their unique physiological needs. The Thoraxians required pressurized methane chambers, while the crystalline Zelenites needed constant electromagnetic fields to maintain their molecular cohesion. In the smallest section, almost hidden between the towering platforms of the more dominant species, sat Earth's representative. To most observers, she appeared unremarkable. Standing barely 5 feet tall with graying hair pulled back in a simple bun, Dr. Elena Vesquez looked more like a retired librarian than a galactic diplomat. Her simple black suit was plain compared to the elaborate ceremonial armor and biomechanical enhancements worn by other representatives. The current speaker was Admiral Korthak of the Hegemony, a massive reptilian creature whose scales gleamed like polished obsidian. His forearms gestured dramatically as he addressed the assembly, his voice a deep rumble that resonated through the translation devices worn by all attendees. "The Void Stalkers have decimated 3 more colonies in the Outer Rim," Korthak announced, his yellow eyes scanning the assembled representatives. "Their bioships consume everything in their path, leaving only empty husks of worlds behind. We need a military response, and we need it now." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the various species. The Void Stalkers were a mysterious enemy that had appeared from beyond the galactic rim 5 years ago. No one knew where they came from, but their technology seemed to absorb and adapt to whatever was thrown at them. Traditional military tactics had proven useless against their living ships that could regenerate damage and evolve new defenses in real time. "The Hegemony volunteers to lead this campaign," Korthak continued, his massive frame casting shadows across the smaller delegations. "Our battle fleets have the experience and firepower necessary to end this threat." Several other military powers voiced their support. The insectoid hive queens clicked their mandibles in approval, while the energy beings known as the luminals pulsed with agreeable frequencies. It seemed the matter was settled until a small voice spoke up from the human section. "I respectfully disagree with that approach, Admiral." The entire hall fell silent. Elena stood slowly, her movement barely registering among the towering forms around her. Many representatives had to adjust their visual sensors to even locate the source of the interruption. Korthak's massive head swiveled toward the human delegation, his predatory gaze focusing on Elena like a hunter sizing up prey. "The human speaks out of turn," he growled. "Your species has been part of this council for barely 50 years. What could you possibly know about warfare that the rest of us do not?" Elena's expression remained calm, her hands clasped behind her back in a posture that suggested neither aggression nor submission. "I know that the Void Stalkers have adapted to every conventional military strategy you've employed. Your fleets attack with overwhelming force, and their bioships simply evolve stronger defenses. The Zelenite crystalline formations try to disrupt their organic processes, and they develop new forms of biological shielding. Even the luminous energy weapons have proven ineffective because the Void Stalkers absorb and redirect that energy. Then, what do you suggest, little human?" This came from Queen Vespa of the Third Hive, her compound eyes glittering with what might have been amusement. "Your species has no significant military technology, no battle fleets capable of engaging capital ships, and your physical forms are among the weakest in known space." Elena nodded calmly. All of that is true. Which is exactly why we might succeed where others have failed. The statement was met with what could only be described as confused silence. Several representatives exchanged glances, their various forms of communication creating a low buzz of uncertainty throughout the hall. Explain, demanded Korthak, his forearms crossing in a gesture that was clearly skeptical. The Void Stalkers adapt to threats by analyzing and countering the strategies used against them. Every time you attack with superior firepower, they evolve stronger defenses. When you use advanced technology, they develop countermeasures. But they've never faced an enemy that relies primarily on tactical thinking rather than technological superiority. Elena began walking slowly around her small platform, her movements measured and deliberate. Human warfare isn't based on having the biggest weapons or the strongest defenses. It's based on understanding your enemy, predicting their moves, and using their own strengths against them. We call it asymmetric warfare. Preposterous, snorted Admiral Korthak. You would send your primitive vessels against an enemy that has consumed entire star systems? Your largest warships are barely the size of our escort frigates. Size isn't everything, Admiral. Some of history's greatest victories have come from smaller, more agile forces defeating larger, more powerful enemies. Elena's voice carried no trace of defensiveness, only quiet confidence. The key is understanding that the Void Stalkers' greatest strength, their ability to adapt, is also their greatest weakness. She gestured toward the holographic display in the center of the hall, which currently showed the expanding territory controlled by the Void Stalkers. They've conquered 43 star systems in 5 years, always using the same pattern. They arrive, overwhelm the defenders with superior numbers and technology, consume the planet's biomass, and move on. They're perfectly adapted for conventional warfare. But they've never faced unconventional warfare. They've never dealt with an enemy that refuses to fight on their terms, that strikes when and where they least expect it, and that uses deception and misdirection instead of brute force. The hall erupted in a cacophony of sounds as various species voiced their opinions. The Thoraxians' mechanical translations produced harsh, grating noises, while the Zelenites' communications created harmonic vibrations that set everyone's teeth on edge. Silence. Korthak's roar cut through the noise like a physical force. The human speaks of cowardice and trickery, not honorable combat. Elena's smile was slight but unmistakable. I speak of victory, Admiral. Honor means nothing to the Void Stalkers. They don't care about your traditions or your concepts of fair play. They care only about consumption and expansion. And you believe your small, weak species can succeed where the combined might of the Galactic Council has failed? Queen Vespa's voice carried a tone of barely concealed mockery. I believe we can offer something you can't: unpredictability. The Void Stalkers have never encountered human tactical doctrine because we've never been significant enough to pose a threat. That's our advantage. Elena activated her personal data pad, projecting a three-dimensional tactical display above her platform. The image showed the most recent Void Stalker attack, their bioships moving in perfect coordination as they overwhelmed the defending fleet. Look at their formation, she said, highlighting specific elements of the attack pattern. Perfect efficiency, optimal force distribution, textbook application of overwhelming superiority. They fight like a computer program designed for maximum effectiveness. She manipulated the display, showing how each previous defense had been overwhelmed by similar tactics. Every species in this council fights rationally. You analyze the enemy's capabilities, match them with your own, and engage where you have the best chance of victory. It's logical, it's sensible, and it's exactly what the Void Stalkers expect. Humans don't always fight logically. We fight emotionally. We take risks that any rational analysis would say are stupid. We sacrifice efficiency for unpredictability, and sometimes we win because our enemies can't predict irrational behavior. Admiral Korthak leaned forward, his massive bulk causing his platform to groan under the weight. You speak of irrationality as if it were a virtue. How can chaos and unpredictability defeat an enemy that has proven superior to organized military force? Elena's expression grew serious. Because sometimes, Admiral, the only way to win an impossible fight is to refuse to play by the rules that make it impossible. She gestured again, and the display changed to show Earth's military history. Images of ancient battles flashed by, small groups of soldiers defeating vastly superior forces through guerrilla tactics, naval battles won by unconventional strategies, and air campaigns that succeeded through sheer audacity rather than overwhelming force. This is how humans have always fought. We don't have the luxury of superior technology or overwhelming numbers. We have to be cleverer, more adaptable, and more willing to take risks that others won't. The silence that followed was different from before. Instead of dismissive confusion, there was a quality of thoughtful consideration. Several representatives were studying the historical data Elena had displayed, their various forms of analytical equipment processing the information. You propose to fight the Void Stalkers using these primitive tactics? The question came from Luminarch Zen, whose energy form flickered with uncertainty. Chemical explosives and projectile weapons against enemies who have absorbed the full force of quantum disruptors and gravimetric cannons? I propose to fight them using principles they've never encountered, Elena corrected. The specific weapons don't matter. What matters is the approach, hit and run tactics, deception, misdirection, and, above all, refusing to give them a conventional battle they can adapt to. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Void Stalkers have evolved to counter every form of direct confrontation. But they've never had to deal with an enemy that refuses to confront them directly. Queen Vespa's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Assuming your theory has merit, which I neither confirm nor deny, how would you implement such tactics? The Void Stalkers' bioships are individually larger than most of our battlecruisers. By not fighting their bioships at all, Elena replied simply. We fight their supply lines, their expansion patterns, their predictability. We make them come to us on our terms, in places and ways they don't expect. She manipulated the display again, showing the expanding pattern of Voidstalker conquests. They move methodically from system to system, always following the path of least resistance toward the most bio-rich worlds. They're like a river flowing downhill, powerful and destructive, but also predictable. We don't try to stop the river. We redirect it. We make their path of least resistance lead exactly where we want them to go. Admiral Korthak's laugh was a harsh, rumbling sound. And where, little human, would you want them to go? Elena's smile was sharp now, and, for just a moment, something flickered behind her calm exterior that made several representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. Somewhere they can't adapt fast enough to save themselves. The hall fell silent once more, but this time the quality of silence was different. There was something in the human's tone, a confidence that seemed out of proportion to her species' apparent capabilities, that gave even the most dismissive representatives pause. Finally, High Counselor Drac, the ancient leader of the council whose species had helped found the galactic civilization millennia ago, spoke in his whispering voice. The human's words carry an interesting perspective. Perhaps it would be worthwhile to hear her complete proposal before we commit to conventional military action. You waste time with fantasy, growled Korthak. While we debate, the Void Stalkers consume more worlds. 3 days, Elena said quietly. Give me 3 days to present a complete tactical assessment, and I'll show you exactly how a small, supposedly weak species proposes to defeat an enemy that has overwhelmed the combined might of the galaxy's greatest military powers. High Counselor Drac's ancient eyes studied the small human for a long moment. There was something about her, a quality of stillness that suggested depths hidden beneath the surface. Very well. 3 days. But, understand, Dr. Vasquez, that if your proposal proves to be without merit, the Council will proceed with conventional military action, and Earth's voice in military matters will be diminished. Elena nodded calmly. Understood, High Counselor. But, I should warn you, when those 3 days are up, you may find yourselves looking at humanity very differently than you do now. As the session ended and representatives began filing out of the Great Hall, many cast curious glances toward the small human who had dared to challenge the military wisdom of species that had been waging war among the stars for millennia. Most still viewed her with skepticism or outright dismissal. None of them noticed the small, satisfied smile that played across Elena's lips as she gathered her materials. Nor did they see the way her eyes tracked movement and assessed potential threats with the automatic precision of someone who had spent decades studying every conceivable form of combat. They saw a small, aging academic who had spoken out of turn. What they didn't see was a woman who had dedicated her life to understanding warfare in all its forms, who had studied the tactical doctrines of every major military power in the galaxy, and who possessed something that no amount of technology could replace: the accumulated strategic wisdom of humanity's greatest military minds. In 3 days, they would begin to understand the difference. Elena Vasquez walked through the corridors of her modest quarters aboard the council station, her footsteps silent on the adaptive flooring that adjusted to each species' preferred walking surface. The walls were transparent aluminum, offering a view of the nebula that housed the massive diplomatic complex. She paused at the viewport, watching ships from dozens of civilizations dock at the various bays, their designs ranging from the organic curves of hive vessels to the geometric perfection of zelenite crystal ships. Behind her, a soft chime indicated an incoming communication. She turned to see Admiral Korthak's imposing figure filling the holographic display, his forearms crossed in what she had learned was a gesture of barely contained aggression among his species. "Dr. Vasquez," he rumbled, his voice carrying undertones of threat even through the translation matrix. "I trust you understand the gravity of the commitment you have made. The Council does not appreciate time being wasted on impossible schemes." Elena moved to her desk, a simple affair that contrasted sharply with the elaborate workstations preferred by other species. "I understand perfectly, Admiral. I also understand that you've spent 5 years watching your fleets be systematically destroyed by an enemy you can't predict or counter." Korthak's eyes narrowed, the nictitating membrane sliding across them in a gesture of extreme displeasure. "My fleets have fought honorably against a superior foe. We have maintained our positions where possible and conducted orderly withdrawals when necessary. You've lost 43 star systems and approximately 60 million military personnel," Elena replied calmly, consulting her datapad. "Your orderly withdrawals have turned into a continuous retreat across 12 parsecs of space." The Admiral's massive form tensed visibly. "You dare criticize the conduct of warriors whose smallest vessel outguns anything in your primitive fleet?" Elena looked up from her datapad, her expression thoughtful rather than confrontational. "Tell me, Admiral, what's the largest military action in your people's history?" The question clearly caught Korthak off guard. His massive head tilted slightly, a gesture that among his species indicated confusion. "What relevance does this have to our current situation? Humor me." Korthak's silence stretched for several seconds before he replied. "The conquest of the Verlani system. 1,200 capital ships, 50,000 support vessels, engagement duration of 6 months. Total victory achieved with minimal casualties." Elena nodded. "Impressive. My people's largest military action involved 65 million military personnel across multiple continents, lasted 6 years, and ended with the complete restructuring of global civilization." She paused. "We call it the Second World War, and it was considered a moderate-sized conflict by human standards." "Impossible," Korthak growled. "Your species lacks the industrial capacity for such numbers, and your world couldn't support the logistics required for. We fought it with chemical explosives, projectile weapons, and aircraft that couldn't break the sound barrier," Elena interrupted. "No energy weapons, no gravimetric drives, no quantum computers. Just human ingenuity, industrial capacity, and an understanding of warfare that your people have never had to develop." She activated her desk's holographic projector, displaying images from human military history. Vast formations of soldiers, enormous industrial complexes converted to weapon production, and battles that sprawled across entire continents. "You see, Admiral, your people have an advantage that has also become a weakness. You're naturally stronger, faster, and tougher than most species. Your technology has always been superior to your enemies. You've never had to fight a war where you were outgunned, outnumbered, and facing an enemy with better equipment." The images shifted to show human conflicts where smaller forces had defeated larger ones through tactical superiority. "Humans have been fighting that kind of war for millennia. We've had to become very, very good at it." Korthak studied the displayed information, his analytical mind processing the tactical implications despite his obvious skepticism. "These historical engagements show certain, interesting tactical developments. But they are primitive conflicts involving equally primitive enemies. The Void Stalkers possess technology that your species couldn't comprehend, much less counter." "The technology doesn't matter," Elena said quietly. Warfare isn't about having the best weapons. It's about using whatever weapons you have more effectively than your enemy uses theirs. She manipulated the display, showing the progression of human military thinking from ancient times to the present. Every human child learns about David and Goliath, Admiral. A shepherd boy with a sling defeating a giant warrior in full armor. It's more than just a story, it's the fundamental principle of human military doctrine. You propose to fight bioships capable of consuming planets with slings? Korthak's voice carried a tone of disbelief that needed no translation. I propose to fight them with something they've never encountered and can't adapt to asymmetric thinking. Elena's fingers danced across her control pad, and the display changed to show detailed analyses of Voigtstalker attack patterns. Look at their tactics, Admiral. Perfect coordination, optimal resource allocation, maximum efficiency in every engagement. The display highlighted specific moments in various battles where Voigtstalker forces had adjusted their strategies in real time to counter defensive measures. They're learning machines, essentially. They analyze threats, develop countermeasures, and implement improved tactics instantly across their entire force. Which is precisely why conventional military action has failed, Korthak admitted grudgingly. They adapt faster than we can innovate new strategies. Exactly. But there's something they can't adapt to: genuine irrationality. Human military history is full of tactical decisions that no logical analysis would recommend, strategies that work precisely because they shouldn't. Elena called up a specific historical example. The Battle of Kenny, fought over 2,000 years ago. A human general named Hannibal deliberately allowed his center to weaken and retreat, drawing a numerically superior enemy into what appeared to be a winning position. Then, he surrounded and destroyed them completely. She highlighted another example. The Normandy invasion during our Second World War. Allied forces convinced the enemy they were going to attack at an entirely different location, then launched the largest amphibious assault in human history at the one place the defenders weren't expecting. More recently, during our colonial expansion phase, a single human frigate disabled a Zelenite heavy cruiser by ramming it at full speed, something that any tactical computer would calculate as suicide. Korthak's four hands moved unconsciously, a gesture Elena recognized as her people's equivalent of rubbing one's chin in thought. These examples suggest a pattern of unconventional thinking. But the Voigtstalkers have proven capable of adapting to unexpected tactics within minutes of first encountering them. Because those tactics were still fundamentally logical, Elena replied. Unexpected, perhaps, but still based on sound military principles that could be analyzed and countered. Human tactical doctrine goes beyond unexpected, it embraces the genuinely irrational when necessary. The display shifted again, showing a detailed psychological profile of human decision-making under extreme stress. We don't just think outside conventional parameters, Admiral. Sometimes we think outside rational parameters entirely. You speak as if this is a positive attribute, Korthak observed. How can irrational behavior be considered a military advantage? Elena smiled, and, for the first time, the expression carried something that made the massive hegemony admiral shift uncomfortably in his chair. Because our irrationality isn't random, Admiral. It's trained. She stood and walked to another section of her quarters, where Admiral Korthak could see what appeared to be an exercise area. But, as Elena began moving through a series of practiced motions, it became clear this wasn't standard physical conditioning. Her movements were fluid, precise, and utterly unlike anything in the standard combat doctrines of known galactic civilizations. She moved like water, flowing around imaginary obstacles, striking at targets that existed only in her mind, and demonstrating a form of physical coordination that seemed to defy the limitations her species was supposedly bound by. Combat forms from 17 different human martial arts traditions, she said calmly, never breaking the rhythm of her practice. Each one developed independently over centuries of warfare. Some emphasize strength, others speed, still others focus on using an opponent's own force against them. She spun and struck in a combination that would have been lethal had there been an actual opponent present. But the key isn't the individual techniques, Admiral. It's the mindset they create. Human warriors don't just learn to fight, they learn to think like fighters. Elena completed her demonstration and turned back to face the holographic display. Every human who masters these arts learns the same fundamental lesson: the best strategy is often the one your enemy would never expect, especially if it seems completely insane. Korthak was quiet for a long moment, studying the small human who had just demonstrated a level of physical capability that his sensors indicated should have been impossible for her species. "Your proposal involves more than tactical innovation," he said finally. "You're suggesting that humans possess qualities that other species fundamentally lack." "Not lack," Elena corrected. "Never developed. Your species is naturally superior in most measurable ways. You've never needed to develop the specific forms of tactical thinking that humans consider essential." She returned to her desk, calling up a comprehensive analysis of galactic military doctrine. Every species in the Council fights rationally. You analyze enemy capabilities, assess your own strengths and weaknesses, and engage where you have the mathematical advantage. It's logical, it's efficient, and it's predictable. The Void Stalkers have adapted to that predictability. They know that every species will fight logically, so they've evolved counter-strategies for every logical approach. But they've never faced an enemy that's willing to fight illogically when logic isn't working. Elena manipulated the display to show detailed projections of Voidstalker expansion patterns. "I've spent the last 5 years studying their tactics, Admiral. Not just the battles they've fought, but the patterns underneath those battles. They're not just adaptive, they're systematic in their adaptation." She highlighted specific data points that showed how Voidstalker responses had become increasingly sophisticated over time. They're learning, but they're learning within specific parameters. They adapt to new technologies, new formations, new strategic approaches. But they've never had to adapt to genuine tactical insanity. And you believe human insanity can defeat them where conventional military power has failed? Elena's smile grew sharper. "I believe, Admiral, that you're about to discover why human military doctrine has a saying that every warrior learns: if you find yourself in a fair fight, your tactics are wrong." Admiral Korthak studied the small human for several more seconds, his massive brain processing implications that he was only beginning to understand. "Dr. Vasquez," he said finally, "you speak with a confidence that suggests you have more experience with military matters than your diplomatic position would indicate." Elena's expression became thoughtful. "Admiral, what do you know about my background? You are listed as a xenological specialist with advanced degrees in comparative civilizations and diplomatic protocols. Standard credentials for a species representative." "That's not incorrect," Elena said slowly, "but it's not complete either." She activated a different set of files, these marked with security classifications that made Korthak's own military credentials look elementary. The data that appeared showed a career that spanned 4 decades and 17 different star systems. "Dr. Elena Vasquez, xenological specialist," she said, highlighting various entries. "Also Colonel Elena Vasquez, Strategic Intelligence Division, Earth Military Command. Graduate of advanced warfare colleges on 6 different worlds, including institutions that your species considers among the finest military academies in known space." Korthak's eyes widened as he processed the information. "You studied at the Hegemony War College. And the Hive Tactical Institute. The records show you graduated with highest honors from programs that most species consider impossible for non-natives to complete." "I studied everywhere I could," Elena confirmed. "Every major military power in the galaxy, every tactical doctrine, every strategic philosophy. I wanted to understand how different species approach warfare, what their strengths and limitations were. But, more importantly, I wanted to understand what advantages humans might have that we weren't recognizing." She called up additional files showing detailed analyses of hundreds of military engagements across galactic history. "It took me 30 years to reach a comprehensive understanding of how galactic warfare operates, Admiral. And another 10 to realize that humans have been approaching it completely wrong. We've been trying to fight like everyone else. We've been trying to match superior technology with clever engineering, superior numbers with better logistics, superior physical capabilities with enhanced training. But that's not where human military superiority lies." Elena's voice carried absolute conviction now, the quiet certainty of someone who had spent decades reaching an inescapable conclusion. "Human superiority lies in our willingness to embrace tactical insanity when sanity isn't working. The Void Stalkers have defeated every rational military strategy in the galaxy. It's time to try an irrational one. Admiral Korthak was silent for a long time, processing not just the information Elena had shared, but the implications of what he was beginning to understand about human capabilities. Finally, he spoke. Dr. Vasquez. Colonel Vasquez, what exactly are you proposing? Elena's smile was sharp enough to cut steel. I'm proposing to show the galaxy what humans have always known, Admiral. Sometimes the only way to win an impossible war is to fight it in a way that makes victory possible. Give me 3 days, and I'll show you how. The council chamber had been reconfigured for Elena's presentation. Instead of the usual ceremonial arrangement, the space now resembled a military briefing room, with holographic displays creating a three-dimensional battlespace that representatives could examine from multiple angles. Elena stood at the center, dwarfed by the towering forms around her, but commanding attention in a way that would have seemed impossible 3 days earlier. Honored representatives, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics, I'm going to show you something that will change how you think about warfare forever. The central display activated, showing the current state of the galaxy. Voidstalker territory was marked in pulsing red, a growing cancer that had consumed nearly a tenth of known space. Traditional military positions were marked in various colors, representing the different powers that had attempted to halt the invasion. For 5 years, the greatest military minds in galactic history have thrown everything they had at this enemy, Elena continued. Advanced technology, overwhelming numbers, superior firepower, tactical innovations that pushed the boundaries of known strategic doctrine. She gestured, and the display began showing a time-lapse of the various battles fought against the Voidstalkers. Without exception, each engagement followed the same pattern: initial success, followed by rapid Voidstalker adaptation, followed by defeat. Every one of these battles was planned by brilliant military commanders using sound tactical principles. Every one of them should have worked. And every one of them failed for the same reason: the Voidstalkers adapted faster than we could innovate. Queen Vespa's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. A point we are all painfully aware of, Dr. Vasquez. What do you propose that differs from these previous attempts? Elena smiled, and the display shifted to show what appeared to be a completely empty sector of space. I propose we give them exactly what they want. Confused murmurs rippled through the assembly. Admiral Korthak's massive frame tensed visibly. Explain that statement. The Voidstalkers follow a predictable pattern, Elena said, manipulating the display to highlight their expansion routes. They seek out systems with high biomass concentrations, worlds with extensive biological resources that they can consume and convert into more bioships. She highlighted several recent conquests. Every world they've attacked has been a major population center or agricultural world. They ignore systems with low biological value, passing them by in favor of richer targets. This suggests they require constant biological input to maintain their expansion. They're not just a military force, they're a biological process that needs to feed to survive. The display changed to show a detailed analysis of Voidstalker bioships, their organic hulls pulsing with barely contained energy. Intelligence reports indicate their ships are grown rather than built. Each vessel is essentially a living organism that requires nutrients to function and reproduce. Luminarch Zen's energy form flickered with interest. You believe they are vulnerable to biological warfare? No, Elena replied. I believe they're vulnerable to being hungry. The statement hung in the air for a moment before High Counselor Drac spoke in his whispering voice. Elaborate. Elena manipulated the display again, showing the current tactical situation. Every military engagement with the Voidstalkers has focused on destroying their ships or stopping their expansion. We've been fighting the symptoms, not the disease. But what if we didn't try to stop them? What if we let them come to us, but made sure they came hungry and desperate? She highlighted a specific system on the edge of Voidstalker territory. The Kepler 442 system. 7 planets, 3 of which have been extensively terraformed for agricultural production. Massive biomass reserves, strategic location along major shipping routes, and apparently an ideal target for Voidstalker expansion. Admiral Korthak studied the displayed system. That sector has already been evacuated. The population was relocated 2 months ago when Void Stalker scouts were detected in the outer system. Exactly, Elena said, her smile becoming predatory. Evacuated, but not abandoned. The agricultural infrastructure is still intact, the biomass reserves are still there, and, to Void Stalker sensors, it looks like an incredibly rich target just waiting to be harvested. She manipulated the display, zooming in on the system's details. What they don't know is that we've had 2 months to prepare that system as the largest trap in galactic history. The display changed to show hidden installations throughout the Kepler 442 system. Camouflaged weapon platforms, concealed supply depots, and what appeared to be an entire fleet positioned in deep stealth configuration. This is where we stop fighting like everybody else and start fighting like humans. Elena began walking around the display, her movements precise and confident. Traditional tactics would position our forces to meet the Void Stalkers at the system's edge, engage them in space combat, and try to prevent them from reaching the planets. Instead, we're going to let them have the system. We're going to let them land on those planets, let them begin their biological harvesting, let them commit their forces to what appears to be an undefended feast. Queen Vespa's compound eyes focused intently on the human. And, then, we spring the trap. But, not the kind of trap they've learned to expect. Elena activated another part of the display, showing detailed schematics of the modifications made to the Kepler 442 system. Every major agricultural facility has been fitted with controlled explosive charges. Every biomass storage center has been rigged to release biological toxins specifically designed to target Voidstalker bioships. The moment their harvesting operations reach maximum efficiency, when their ships are most heavily loaded with biological material and, operating at reduced mobility, we trigger simultaneous detonations across 3 planets. Admiral Korthak's forehands moved in agitation. You would poison an entire star system? Temporarily, Elena confirmed. The toxins are designed to break down within 72 hours. But, during those 72 hours, any bioship that has consumed contaminated biomass will experience progressive system failures. The display showed projected effects of the biological warfare agents Elena's people had developed. Voidstalker bioships slowing, their organic hulls beginning to show signs of decay, their coordination breaking down as the toxins affected their distributed nervous systems. While they're dealing with biological system failures, we hit them with everything we have. But, not in the way they expect. Elena gestured, and the display revealed the true extent of the trap. Hidden throughout the system were not just human vessels, but ships from every major military power in the galaxy, all positioned according to a coordinated plan that bore no resemblance to any standard tactical doctrine. Instead of engaging them as a unified fleet, we attack as individuals. Every ship operates independently, with no coordination, no standardized tactics, no predictable formations. Chaos, breathed Luminarch Zen. Controlled chaos, Elena corrected. Every captain has complete tactical freedom to engage however they think best. No overall strategy, no unified command structure, no predictable patterns for the Voidstalkers to adapt to. She manipulated the display to show simulated combat scenarios. They'll be dealing with hegemony ships using traditional heavy assault tactics, hive vessels employing swarm formations, Zelenite cruisers using crystal and resonance weapons, luminal energy beings attacking with pure photonic force, and human ships doing things that no sane tactical computer would ever recommend. Admiral Korthak studied the projections, his massive brain processing the implications. You're creating tactical anarchy. No enemy could adapt to completely random tactical approaches because there would be no pattern to adapt to. Exactly. And, while they're trying to deal with dozens of different tactical approaches simultaneously, while their bioships are suffering from biological toxin effects, while they're separated from their supply lines and committed to positions they can't easily retreat from, we hit them with the real surprise. Elena's expression became deadly serious. We don't just attack their ships. We attack their entire biological process. The display shifted to show intelligence data about Voidstalker reproduction and expansion. Their bioships don't just consume biomass for energy. They use it to grow new ships, to heal damage, to maintain their distributed consciousness across the fleet. Cut off their access to biomass, poison what they've already consumed, and force them into extended combat while their ships are literally starving to death. She highlighted specific tactical projections. Voidstalker bioships are incredibly powerful when they're well-fed and operating at peak efficiency. But they're surprisingly fragile when they're hungry and poisoned. High Counselor Drax's ancient voice carried notes of both admiration and concern. This plan requires a level of coordination between species that has never been attempted. It requires military commanders to deliberately abandon sound tactical doctrine in favor of apparent chaos. It requires, Elena said quietly, that everyone involved be willing to fight in a way that goes against everything they've been trained to believe. Queen Vespa's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of intense thought. The biological warfare aspects of this plan, they represent a level of sophisticated biochemical engineering that your species has never demonstrated. Elena's smile was sharp. Your Majesty, you're about to learn something else about humans that we don't advertise widely. She activated a new set of displays showing Earth's military-industrial complex in detail. Hidden manufacturing facilities, research installations buried deep underground, and production capabilities that dwarfed anything the galaxy had attributed to humanity. We've been part of the Galactic Council for 50 years. During that time, we've been very careful to appear primitive, non-threatening, and technologically insignificant. Elena's voice carried quiet satisfaction. What we haven't mentioned is that we've been using that 50 years to study, learn, and prepare for exactly this kind of situation. The display showed human research facilities that had reverse-engineered and improved upon technologies from every major galactic civilization. We've been preparing for the day when being underestimated would become our greatest tactical advantage. Admiral Korthak's eyes narrowed. You've been planning this for decades. We've been planning for every possible contingency for decades, Elena corrected. The Voidstalker invasion just happens to be a contingency where human tactical doctrine offers genuine advantages. She gestured to the comprehensive tactical plan displayed around them. Everything you're seeing represents the culmination of 50 years of human strategic planning. 50 years of studying how galactic warfare operates and identifying the weaknesses in conventional tactical thinking. The biological weapons, the stealth technology, the coordinated chaos tactics, all of it has been developed specifically to counter enemies that conventional military doctrine can't defeat. The chamber fell silent as representatives processed the full scope of what Elena was proposing. Finally, Admiral Korthak spoke. This plan requires military forces from multiple species to operate under human command. No, Elena said. This plan requires military forces from multiple species to operate under human guidance while maintaining complete tactical independence. Every captain, every commander, every pilot operates according to their own judgment and their species' preferred combat methods. The only coordination is in timing and target selection. Everything else is deliberate chaos. Queen Vespa's voice carried a note of grudging respect. You've created a tactical doctrine that weaponizes unpredictability itself. We've created a tactical doctrine that treats adaptability as a weakness rather than a strength, Elena replied. The Voidstalker's ability to adapt quickly is devastating when they're facing predictable enemies. But it becomes a liability when they're facing genuinely unpredictable ones. She manipulated the display one final time, showing projected outcomes of the battle. They'll try to adapt to our tactics, but every time they adjust to counter one approach, another ship will be attacking them using completely different methods. They'll be like a computer trying to solve a problem where the parameters keep changing randomly. Eventually, the computational load becomes too great and the system fails. High Counselor Drax studied the tactical projections for several minutes before speaking. This plan represents either brilliant strategic innovation or complete tactical insanity. Elena's smile was confident. In human military doctrine, Counselor, those are often the same thing. The ancient leader's expression was unreadable. Very well, Dr. Vasquez. You have convinced the Council to attempt your unorthodox approach. But understand that if this plan fails, the consequences will fall upon humanity alone. Understood, Elena replied calmly. But I should warn you, Counselor, if this plan succeeds, you may never look at warfare the same way again. As the session ended and representatives began filing out of the chamber, many cast thoughtful glances toward the small human who had just proposed a military strategy unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Elena remained at the center of the display, studying the tactical projections with the satisfaction of someone who had spent decades preparing for this moment. Around her, the holographic representations of ships from dozens of species moved in patterns that would have horrified any conventional military strategist. But Elena wasn't a conventional strategist. She was something the galaxy had never seen before, a human grandmaster of asymmetric warfare, and she was about to teach the universe a lesson in fighting impossible battles. The bridge of the human dreadnought Indomitable was a study in controlled tension. Unlike the massive command centers favored by other species, the human vessel's bridge was compact, efficient, and designed for rapid decision-making under extreme stress. Elena stood at the central tactical display, watching as sensors detected the approaching Void Stalker fleet. 237 bioships, reported Commander Sarah Chen from the sensor station. Ranging from frigate-class scouts to what appears to be a planetary harvester the size of a small moon. Elena studied the approaching formation with the calm expression of someone who had anticipated exactly this scenario. Around the Kepler 442 system, hidden fleets from 7 different species waited in perfect concealment, each positioned according to the chaotic battle plan she had devised. They're following predictable approach patterns, observed Admiral Korthak from his position aboard the Hegemony flagship. His massive form filled the communication display, forearms moving in gestures of barely contained aggression. Standard formation for maximum harvesting efficiency. Exactly as projected, Elena confirmed. They see 3 uninhabited agricultural worlds with massive biomass reserves and no apparent defenses. To them, this looks like an easy meal. Through the communication network, Queen Vespa's voice carried sharp anticipation. The lead elements are beginning their descent toward Kepler 442b. Shall we initiate the attack? Negative, Elena replied calmly. Let them land. Let them begin their harvesting operations. We need them committed to positions they can't easily retreat from. On the tactical display, Void Stalker bioships descended toward the 3 terraformed worlds like a living plague. Their organic hulls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns as they deployed harvesting appendages toward the agricultural installations below. Elena watched with professional detachment as the trap she had spent months preparing began to unfold. The Void Stalkers moved with perfect efficiency, their actions coordinated by the distributed intelligence that linked every bioship in their fleet. It was beautiful in its terrible precision. Harvesting operations have reached 60% of optimal efficiency, reported Luminarch Zen from the energy being's position near the system's outer edge. Their ships are loading biological material at maximum sustainable rates. Estimated time until full commitment? Elena asked. 17 minutes at current harvesting rates, came the response from multiple sources. Elena began her final preparations, activating communication channels to every hidden ship in the system. All units, prepare for synchronized implementation. Remember, no coordination beyond initial timing. Once we begin, every ship operates independently according to their captain's judgment. She paused, looking around the bridge at her own crew. These were humans who had trained for this moment their entire careers, officers who understood the insane logic of human military doctrine better than anyone else in the galaxy. Biological warfare systems are armed and ready, reported the weapons officer. Toxin dispensers show green across all agricultural facilities on all 3 worlds. Elena nodded. Final confirmation, all units report readiness status. The responses came in from across the system. Hegemony battle fleets powered up their massive weapon systems. Hive swarm ships prepared their coordinated attack formations. Zelenite crystalline cruisers charged their resonance cannons. Luminal energy beings focused their photonic arrays. And, scattered throughout the system, human vessels prepared to implement tactics that had no basis in conventional military doctrine. Void Stalker harvesting operations have reached 85% efficiency, reported Commander Chen. Bioships are heavily loaded with biological material. Mobility is significantly reduced. Elena studied the tactical display, watching as hundreds of Void Stalker vessels committed themselves to positions around the 3 worlds. They were feeding voraciously, their bioships growing visibly larger as they consumed the carefully prepared biological material. 90% efficiency. All major bioships are now committed to harvesting operations. Elena's voice carried absolute calm. Execute biological warfare protocol. All agricultural facilities, simultaneous detonation in 3, 2, 1, execute. Across 3 worlds, carefully hidden charges detonated in perfect synchronization. Agricultural installations that had taken decades to build disappeared in controlled explosions that sent clouds of specially designed biological toxins into the atmosphere. Every storage facility, every processing plant, every biomass collection center released its deadly payload simultaneously. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Voidstalker bioships that had been feeding peacefully suddenly found themselves consuming biological material laced with toxins specifically designed to target their organic systems. Their hulls, which had been glowing with healthy bioluminescence, began to dim and show irregular patterns. Biological warfare successful, reported the science officer. Toxin absorption confirmed across all target vessels. Estimated time until significant system degradation is 12 minutes. Phase 2, Elena announced calmly. All units, commence independent tactical operations. What happened next would be discussed in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. The hidden fleets revealed themselves all at once, but, instead of forming coordinated battle lines or implementing unified tactical doctrine, they attacked as complete individuals. Every ship, every squadron, every battle group operated according to its captain's personal judgment and species-specific combat preferences. Admiral Korthak's hegemony forces emerged from concealment and immediately formed traditional heavy assault formations, their massive vessels advancing in disciplined lines while pouring devastating firepower into the nearest Voidstalker positions. Queen Vespa's hive ships materialized from their hiding places and immediately dispersed into swarm tactics, hundreds of smaller vessels moving in coordinated but chaotic patterns that resembled nothing so much as an attack by angry insects. The Zelenite crystalline cruisers appeared in perfect geometric formations and began broadcasting resonance frequencies designed to disrupt the molecular structure of Voidstalker bioships. Luminal energy beings simply manifested as pure light, moving at speeds that made tracking difficult while releasing focused photonic bursts that burned through organic armor like cutting torches. And, scattered throughout this tactical chaos, human vessels implemented strategies that defied every principle of conventional space warfare. The destroyer Crazy Horse launched its entire payload of nuclear warheads, not at enemy ships, but at empty points in space calculated to create debris fields that would disrupt Voidstalker movement patterns. The cruiser Lady Gull flew directly into the middle of a Voidstalker formation and began ramming enemy vessels while its crew evacuated to escape pods, turning the ship itself into a kinetic weapon. The carrier Midway launched fighters that immediately began performing aerobatic maneuvers that served no tactical purpose except to confuse enemy targeting systems. The result was exactly what Elena had predicted: tactical chaos so complete that no adaptive intelligence could possibly analyze and counter it. Voidstalker formation integrity is breaking down, reported Commander Chen. Their bioships are trying to adapt to multiple tactical approaches simultaneously. On the display, Elena could see the enemy fleet's coordination beginning to fragment. Bioships that had been operating in perfect harmony were now responding to threats in different ways, their adaptive processes overloading as they tried to counter dozens of different combat methods simultaneously. Biological toxins are reaching full effectiveness, added the science officer. Enemy vessels are showing significant mobility impairment and weapon system degradation. But the Voidstalkers were far from defeated. Even poisoned and confused, their individual bioships were still formidable opponents. As their initial shock wore off, they began falling back on basic combat instincts, lashing out at the nearest threats with desperate ferocity. They're adapting, warned Admiral Korthak. Some vessels are developing partial immunity to the biological agents. Expected, Elena replied calmly. Phase 3. All human vessels implement desperation protocols. What happened next convinced every alien observer that humans were genuinely insane. The remaining human ships began implementing tactics that violated every principle of military sanity. Vessels flew directly into enemy fire while broadcasting surrender signals, then self-destructed at point-blank range. Fighters performed kamikaze attacks against targets that weren't even strategically significant. Capital ships began fighting each other while enemy vessels watched in apparent confusion. "What are you doing?" demanded Queen Vespa. "Your ships are attacking each other." Simulated friendly fire, Elena explained calmly. We're making the Voidstalkers think we've lost coordination completely. It will make them overconfident and careless. Indeed, several Voidstalker bioships had stopped targeting human vessels entirely, apparently concluding that the humans were destroying themselves more effectively than enemy fire could manage. It was exactly the opening Elena had been waiting for. All units, she announced quietly, implement final phase. Target the Harvester. The massive Voidstalker harvester ship, the moon-sized vessel that served as the fleet's primary biomass processor, had been largely ignored during the battle. Protected by smaller bioships and, apparently too valuable to risk in direct combat, it had remained in high orbit around Kepler 442b, continuing its biological processing operations. What the Voidstalkers didn't realize was that Elena's entire battle plan had been designed around one objective: getting close enough to that harvester to deliver a single, perfectly placed attack. The human ship Thermopylae had been playing dead for the last 10 minutes, drifting through the battle zone with all systems apparently offline. To Voidstalker sensors, it appeared to be just another casualty of the chaotic engagement. In reality, it was carrying the largest shaped nuclear charge ever constructed by human engineering, specifically designed to penetrate bioship armor and deliver its payload directly into the harvester's biological core. Thermopylae is in position, reported the communications officer. Elena's voice was quiet but carried across every ship in the system. Captain Morrison, you are cleared to implement final strike. The response came from Captain Sarah Morrison, whose voice carried the calm professionalism of someone who had volunteered for a mission with no possibility of survival. Understood, Command. It has been an honor. The Thermopylae suddenly roared to life, its engines burning at maximum power as it accelerated directly toward the massive harvester. The ship's approach was so unexpected, so tactically insane, that the Voidstalker defensive systems didn't even attempt to intercept it. The nuclear detonation, when it came, was visible from every ship in the system. The shape charge punched through the harvester's bioarmor and detonated directly inside its biological processing core, triggering a chain reaction that consumed the massive vessel from the inside. The effect on the Voidstalker fleet was immediate and catastrophic. The harvester had served as their primary coordination node, the biological computer that processed information and distributed tactical updates across the entire fleet. With its destruction, 237 bioships suddenly found themselves operating as individuals rather than parts of a coordinated organism. Their adaptive capabilities, so devastating when focused through centralized intelligence, became merely impressive when distributed across separate vessels. All units, Elena announced, the enemy has lost central coordination. Standard tactical operations are now authorized. The battle that followed was vicious but brief. Voidstalker bioships, weakened by biological toxins, confused by chaotic tactics, and deprived of their central coordination, were systematically destroyed by the combined fleet. When it was over, not a single Voidstalker vessel remained operational in the Kepler 442 system. Elena stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching as recovery teams moved through the debris field. Around her, her crew worked with quiet efficiency, already beginning the analysis that would help refine human tactical doctrine for future engagements. Casualties, she asked. 17 vessels lost, including the Thermopylae, reported Commander Chen. Total personnel lost, 312. Elena nodded grimly. In conventional space warfare, the destruction of a fleet this size would have cost thousands of lives. But, then, nothing about this engagement had been conventional. Admiral Korthak is requesting communication, announced the communications officer. Elena activated the channel, and the massive hegemony commander's image filled the display. For the first time since she had known him, Admiral Korthak looked genuinely shaken. Dr. Vasquez, he said slowly, I have been fighting wars for over 2 centuries. I have studied every major tactical doctrine in galactic history. But, I have never seen anything like what your people just accomplished. Elena's expression was thoughtful. What we accomplished, Admiral. This was a combined operation. No, Korthak said firmly. This was human tactical doctrine using other species as weapons. The difference is significant. Other communication channels opened as representatives from across the fleet requested to speak with Elena. Queen Vespa, Luminarch Zen, and even High Counselor Drac himself wanted to understand what they had just witnessed. "The galaxy owes humanity a debt," said High Counselor Drac's whispering voice. "You have proven that the Void Stalkers can be defeated." Elena's smile was slight but satisfied. "We've proven that they can be defeated by tactics they've never encountered before. But they're adaptive, Counselor. They'll learn from this engagement. Which means," she continued, "that next time, we'll have to be even more creative." The implications of that statement settled over the communication network like a heavy weight. Every commander present was beginning to understand that Elena hadn't just won a battle, she had fundamentally changed how warfare would be conducted for generations to come. "Dr. Vasquez," asked Admiral Korthak quietly, "what other tactical innovations has humanity developed that we haven't seen yet?" Elena's expression became thoughtful as she considered the question. Around her, the bridge crew continued their work, already analyzing the battle data and preparing for whatever challenges lay ahead. "Admiral," she said finally, "you're about to discover that this was just the beginning." 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442, the Great Hall of the Galactic Council had been fundamentally transformed. Where once species had been seated according to their military might and territorial holdings, the new arrangement reflected a different kind of power structure entirely. Elena stood at the center of what was now called the Strategic Planning Circle, surrounded by holographic displays showing real-time intelligence from across the galaxy. The simple black suit was gone, replaced by the formal uniform of her new position, Supreme Tactical Coordinator of the Galactic Defense Initiative. The title was impressive, but Elena knew the reality was more complex. The galaxy hadn't just gained a new military leader, it had undergone a fundamental shift in how warfare itself was understood and conducted. Intelligence reports confirmed 17 additional Void Stalker incursions over the past month, announced Commander Chen, who now served as Elena's primary intelligence coordinator. All were defeated using modified asymmetric tactics developed by joint species tactical groups. Admiral Korthak, whose massive form now occupied a position of honor adjacent to the human delegation, nodded approvingly. "The success rate has been remarkable. Void Stalker adaptive capabilities have proven insufficient against true tactical unpredictability." Elena studied the reports with satisfaction, but also with growing concern. "Show me the adaptation patterns," she requested. The central display shifted to show detailed analyses of Void Stalker behavior across multiple engagements. What Elena saw confirmed her suspicions. "They're learning," she said quietly. "Look at Engagement 17 versus Engagement 3. Their response time to chaotic tactics has improved by 47%. Queen Vespa's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "You predicted this would happen." "Yes. The Void Stalkers are adaptive, but they're not stupid. Every time we use asymmetric tactics against them, we give them data about how those tactics work." Elena manipulated the display to highlight specific patterns. "They're beginning to develop counter-strategies for tactical unpredictability itself." High Counselor Drac's ancient voice carried notes of concern. "Are you saying that your unconventional methods will eventually become ineffective?" Elena's smile was sharp. "I'm saying that warfare is an evolutionary process, Counselor. Both sides adapt, both sides evolve, and the side that adapts faster usually wins." She gestured, and the display changed to show something that made several representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. It was a schematic of what appeared to be a massive military academy, but unlike anything that had existed before. "Which is why we're not just going to teach the galaxy how to fight unpredictably. We're going to teach it how to think unpredictably." The structure on the display was enormous, a complex of training facilities, research installations, and educational centers that dwarfed anything previously constructed for military purposes. "The Institute for Asymmetric Warfare," Elena announced. "A joint venture between all Council species, designed to develop tactical doctrines that the Void Stalkers, or any future enemy, will never be able to predict or counter." Admiral Korthak studied the schematics with professional interest. This facility would train officers from every species in human tactical methodology. "Not just human methodology," Elena corrected. "We're going to develop new tactical approaches that combine the strengths of every species in the galaxy." Human unpredictability, hegemony, firepower, hive coordination, Zelenite precision, luminal mobility, all integrated into tactical doctrines that are genuinely revolutionary. She manipulated the display to show detailed training programs. We're going to teach officers to think in ways that violate their species' natural inclinations. We're going to create military leaders who can switch between rational and irrational thinking at will. Queen Vespa's voice carried a note of unease. You speak of fundamentally altering how entire species approach warfare. Such changes could have consequences beyond military applications. Elena nodded seriously. You're absolutely right, Your Majesty. This won't just change how we fight wars, it will change how we think about conflict resolution, crisis management, and problem solving in general. She paused, looking around at the assembled representatives. The question is whether we're willing to make those changes in order to survive. Luminarch Zen's energy form flickered with uncertainty. The psychological profiles required for such training would be disturbing to most species. You are essentially asking us to teach our finest minds to embrace controlled insanity. I'm asking you to teach them to be human when being human is what the situation requires, Elena replied calmly. And, to be themselves when that's what's needed instead. The display shifted again, showing tactical projections that extended far beyond the current Void Stalker threat. Elena had been thinking about more than just the immediate war, she had been planning for conflicts that hadn't even begun yet. The galaxy faces threats that we don't even know about yet, she continued. The Void Stalkers were the first genuinely unpredictable enemy most of us had encountered, but they won't be the last. She highlighted areas of space beyond the galactic rim, regions that remained largely unexplored. Unknown civilizations, new forms of warfare, enemy capabilities that we can't even imagine, all of them waiting for us to encounter them. Traditional military doctrine assumes that enemies will fight rationally, that they'll follow predictable patterns based on logical analysis of tactical situations. But, what happens when we face an enemy that doesn't think like any known species? Admiral Korthak's forehands moved in a gesture of troubled thought. You believe there are threats beyond the Void Stalkers? I know there are, Elena replied with quiet certainty. The universe is vast, and intelligence can evolve in ways that we haven't even begun to understand. Someday, we're going to face an enemy that makes the Void Stalkers look conventional. She activated another set of displays, showing theoretical tactical scenarios that pushed the boundaries of imagination. Gas cloud intelligences that exist in stellar atmospheres. Machine civilizations that think at quantum speeds. Dimensional entities that can manipulate spacetime itself. Each of them will require tactical approaches that don't exist yet, strategies that no current military doctrine can handle. The assembled representatives studied the projections with growing unease. Elena's scenarios weren't just military exercises, they were glimpses into a future where the nature of warfare itself would continue to evolve beyond recognition. The Institute for Asymmetric Warfare isn't just about defeating the Void Stalkers, Elena continued. It's about preparing the galaxy for whatever comes next. High Counselor Drac was quiet for a long moment before speaking. You are proposing to fundamentally alter galactic civilization in preparation for threats that may never materialize. I'm proposing to give galactic civilization the tools it needs to survive anything, Elena corrected. Because the alternative is extinction. She gestured, and the display showed the current state of the galaxy. Void Stalker territory had been pushed back significantly, but it still represented a substantial threat. More importantly, it served as a visible reminder of how quickly a superior enemy could devastate known space. 6 months ago, the greatest military powers in galactic history were losing a war against an enemy they couldn't understand or predict. Today, we're winning because we learned to think differently. The question is, what happens when thinking differently isn't enough? What happens when we need to think in ways that we haven't even imagined yet? Elena's expression grew serious. That's what the Institute is designed to address. Not just current threats, but the fundamental challenge of remaining adaptable in an unpredictable universe. The chamber fell silent as representatives processed the full scope of what Elena was proposing. She wasn't just asking them to change their military doctrine, she was asking them to change their entire approach to dealing with the unknown. Admiral Korthak spoke first. The hegemony commits to this endeavor. Our officers will train in these new methodologies, no matter how uncomfortable they may be for our species. Queen Vespa's mandibles clicked decisively. The Hive Collective agrees. Our tactical specialists will learn to think as individuals when necessary. One by one, the other species voiced their support. Some expressed reservations, others showed enthusiasm, but all recognized the necessity of Elena's vision. High Counselor Drax's whispered voice carried the weight of final authority. The Galactic Council approves the establishment of the Institute for Asymmetric Warfare. Dr. Vasquez, you will serve as its first director. Elena bowed formally. I accept the position, Counselor. But, I should warn you, the Institute's first graduating class is going to include military leaders who think in ways that will make today's tactics look conventional. And that, she added with a slight smile, is exactly what we need. As the session ended and representatives began filing out of the chamber, many paused to study the small human who had fundamentally changed their understanding of warfare. They saw someone who had proven that sometimes the most dangerous enemy wasn't the one with the biggest weapons or the strongest defenses, it was the one who could think in ways that no logical analysis could predict. Elena remained at the center of the strategic planning circle, studying projections of the Institute that would soon rise from the empty space of a carefully selected star system. Around her, holographic displays showed tactical scenarios that pushed the boundaries of imagination, preparations for conflicts that might not occur for decades or centuries. Commander Chen approached with a datapad containing preliminary designs for the Institute's curriculum. The psychological conditioning protocols are extensive, she observed. Some species are expressing concerns about the mental health implications of teaching rational minds to think irrationally. Elena's smile was thoughtful. Commander, the greatest military leaders in human history have always been just a little bit crazy. Now we're going to teach the entire galaxy how to be crazy in a controlled, tactical fashion. She looked up at the displays showing the vast scope of the Institute project. What we're building isn't just a military academy. We're creating the foundation for a new kind of galactic civilization, one that can adapt to anything the universe throws at it. Even things it hasn't thought of yet. Commander Chen studied her superior with the expression of someone who was beginning to understand the true scope of Elena's vision. You're not just preparing for the next war, are you? You're preparing for all future wars. Elena's expression grew distant as she contemplated the vast unknowns that lay beyond the edges of mapped space. Commander, somewhere out there in the universe, there are intelligences that think in ways we can't even comprehend. Some of them will be peaceful. Some of them will be hostile. And some of them will be so alien that the concepts of peace and hostility won't even apply. When we encounter them, and we will encounter them, the galaxy will need military leaders who can think their way through impossible situations. She turned to face Commander Chen directly. Human tactical doctrine has always been based on one fundamental principle: there is no such thing as an impossible victory, only insufficient imagination. The Institute for Asymmetric Warfare is going to teach the galaxy how to have sufficient imagination for anything. As Elena spoke, sensor reports were arriving from deep space observation posts. New contacts, unidentified signatures, hints of intelligences that existed in forms and places that challenged every assumption about life and consciousness. The Void Stalkers had been defeated, but they had also served as a warning. The universe was vast, filled with wonders and terrors beyond imagination. And, somewhere in that vastness, new challenges were already beginning their long journey toward the Milky Way. Elena had proven that even the smallest, weakest species could become the galaxy's greatest warriors when they learned to fight in ways their enemies couldn't predict or counter. Now she was going to teach the entire galaxy to think like humans. The universe would never be the same.